Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most controversial cases in American history, the Ressmers case, or the Reservation Murders. On June 26, 1975, two FBI agents, Jack Kohler and Ronald Williams, were killed on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. The man convicted of their murders? Leonard Peltier, a Native American activist with the American Indian Movement, or AIM. But here's the kicker. Nearly 50 years later, people are still arguing about what really happened that day. Was Peltier a cold-blooded killer or a political prisoner caught in a web of injustice? Buckle up, because this story is a wild ride, full of tension, tragedy, and unanswered questions. Let's start at the beginning. To understand what happened on that fateful day, we need to go back to the early 1970s. Pine Ridge, home to the Oglala Lakota people, was a powder keg ready to explode. This wasn't just any reservation. It was ground zero for a clash between two worlds. On one side, you had the traditionalists, folks who wanted to hold on to Lakota customs and resist the U.S. government's influence. On the other, you had the progressives, led by tribal chairman Dick Wilson, who favored assimilation and cooperation with federal authorities. Wilson wasn't exactly a saint. His critics called him corrupt, and he ruled with an iron fist, backed by a vigilante group known as the Goons, guardians of the Oglala Nation. Between 1973 and 1975, Pine Ridge saw what AIM called a reign of terror. Over 60 unsolved murders, violence everywhere, and a community torn apart. Then there's the American Indian Movement, AIM, formed in the late 1960s in Minneapolis. AIM was like the Black Panthers of Native America, militant, proud, and fed up with broken treaties and systemic oppression. They'd already made waves with high-profile protests, like the 1973 occupation of Wounded Knee, just 2 years before our story begins. That 71-day standoff with federal agents left scars and a deep distrust of the FBI. Enter Leonard Peltier, an AIM member from North Dakota's Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. In 1975, he's a fugitive, wanted in Wisconsin for allegedly trying to kill an off-duty cop, a charge he'd later beat. When Lakota elders begged AIM for help against Wilson's goons, Peltier answered the call, setting up camp at the Jumping Bull Ranch in Oglala. That decision would change everything. It's a hot, sunny morning on June 26, 1975. Jack Kohler, 28, and Ronald Williams, 27, are FBI special agents assigned to the Rapid City Resident Agency. Kohler's a California native, a former LA cop turned agent, tough and dedicated. Williams, also from California, is newer to the job but eager, a guy friends say deserved a family he'd never get the chance to have. That day, they're on the reservation looking for Jimmy Eagle, a young native man wanted for stealing cowboy boots and roughing up some ranch hands. It's a routine job, or so they think. Around 11:50 a.m., Williams spots a red and white vehicle, maybe a pickup, maybe a van. Accounts differ. He radios Kohler, who's in a separate car, and they follow it into the Jumping Bull compound, a cluster of homes and tents where Peltier and other AIM members are staying. What happens next is chaos, and it's where the story splits into two wildly different versions. According to the FBI, Williams calls out over the radio, "We've got a vehicle stopped. They're about to fire on us." Seconds later, shots ring out. The agents are pinned down at the bottom of a hill, taking heavy fire from multiple directions. Up above, Peltier and other AIM members, like Norman Charles and Joe Stuntz, are armed and ready. The feds say the agents never stood a chance. Kohler's hit in the arm, Williams in the foot. Their cars are riddled with 125 bullet holes. Then the kill shots. Both men are shot in the head at point-blank range, execution style. But Peltier's side tells a different tale. He says he was asleep in a tent when gunfire woke him up. "We're being attacked," someone yells. He grabs a rifle and runs toward the sound, thinking it's goons or vigilantes, not FBI agents in unmarked cars. AIM claims they were defending themselves in a war zone where strangers rolling up unannounced could mean death. Who fired first? That's the million-dollar question, and no one agrees. By the time the dust settles, Kohler and Williams are dead. But they're not the only ones. Joe Stuntz, an AIM member, is killed too, shot by a law enforcement sniper, though no one's ever been charged for his death. The FBI launches Ressmers, Reservation Murders, the biggest manhunt in its history. Peltier and others slip away, leaving behind a crime scene that'll fuel decades of debate. Kohler's FBI jacket is found on Stuntz's body, ripped from the trunk of Kohler's car. Weapons are scattered everywhere. The feds are furious, and they want blood. 4 men are indicted: Peltier, Robert Robideau, Daryl Dino Butler, and Jimmy Eagle. But the case starts unraveling fast. Charges against Eagle are dropped. Robideau and Butler face trial first in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And here's the shocker: they're acquitted. The jury buys their self-defense argument, pointing to the chaos and fear on Pine Ridge. That leaves Peltier as the last man standing, and the FBI's top target. Peltier doesn't stick around. He flees to Canada, hopping from safe house to safe house. By December 1975, he's on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. The feds track him to Alberta, where the Royal Canadian Mounted Police nab him on February 6, 1976. But extraditing him isn't easy. The U.S. leans on affidavits from Myrtle Poorbear, a Native woman who claims she saw Peltier shoot the agents. Problem is, Poorbear's story keeps changing. She later says the FBI coerced her, threatened her, and she wasn't even there. Canada still sends Peltier back, but that shaky evidence plants the first seeds of doubt. Meanwhile, evidence trickles in. An AR-15 rifle linked to Peltier explodes in a car on the Kansas Turnpike months later. Ballistics tie it to casings at the scene. Kohler's handgun turns up under the front seat of an RV Peltier was tied to. The prosecution's building a case, but it's messy, and critics say it's full of holes. April 1977, Fargo, North Dakota. Peltier's trial begins, and it's a circus. The judge, Paul Benson, clamps down hard. No evidence about Pine Ridge's violence or the goons is allowed. The jury, mostly white, doesn't get the full context of why AEM was even there. Witnesses like Michael Anderson, an AEM member, testify they saw Peltier near the agents' cars during the shootout. Ballistics link the AR-15 to the scene, though the gun's too damaged to test directly. The prosecution paints Peltier as a ruthless cop killer who finished off 2 wounded agents. Peltier's defense: he admits firing shots but swears he didn't kill anyone. He says the feds framed him to crush AIM, pointing to withheld documents, coerced witnesses, and that dodgy extradition. But the jury doesn't buy it. After 6 hours of deliberation, they convict him on 2 counts of first-degree murder. sentenced 2 consecutive life terms. Peltier's 32 years old, and his life as a free man is over, or so it seems. Almost immediately, the case sparks outrage. Amnesty International calls it a human rights tragedy. Nelson Mandela, Coretta Scott King, even Pope Francis back Peltier's release. Why? The trial's riddled with red flags. Myrtle Poor Bear recants. The FBI admits to withholding thousands of documents. A key witness, Darlene Nichols, later says she was pressured to testify against Peltier, her ex. Ballistics evidence gets murkier. Experts can't definitively tie Peltier's gun to the fatal shots. Supporters say he's a political prisoner, scapegoated for Ames' defiance. But the FBI and the agents' families push back hard. They say Peltier executed Kohler and Williams in cold blood. End of story. To them, every appeal, every parole hearing is a slap in the face. Ronald Kohler, Jack's son, writes in 2022, Peltier knows his guilt. The law enforcement community rallies, with hundreds of agents protesting any hint of clemency. Peltier's locked up, first at Leavenworth, then Coleman in Florida. He's eligible for parole in 1993, but it's denied every time. Why? He won't confess because he says he didn't do it. In 1999, he tells CNN, I didn't kill those agents. I don't know who did. His health tanks, diabetes, heart issues, a stroke. By his 70s, he's frail, but his supporters never quit. They march, they write, they beg for mercy. In 2009, parole's rejected again. Obama denies clemency in 2017. Then in June 2024, another hearing, his lawyer, Kevin Sharp, calls it his last chance. The Parole Commission says no, citing his lack of remorse. He's set to stay locked up until at least 2026, when he'd be 81. It looks like Peltier might die in prison. But then January 19th, 2025, just before leaving office, President Joe Biden drops a bombshell. He commutes Peltier's sentence to indefinite house arrest, citing his severe health ailments and ties to the Native community. On February 18th, Peltier walks out of Coleman, a free man, sort of. He's 80, headed to a furnished home on the Turtle Mountain Reservation. At a welcome event, he says, "It's finally over. I'm going home." The reaction? Explosive. AIM and indigenous groups celebrate. Justice at last. The FBI Agents Association calls it a cruel betrayal, furious that a cop killer is free. Kohler and Williams families are devastated. The debate reignites, hero or murderer. So what's the truth? Did Peltier pull the trigger, or was he a fall guy? The evidence is a mess. Conflicting testimonies, shaky ballistics, missing documents. No one saw the fatal shots. Peltier admits he fired a gun, but says it wasn't him. Some whisper another AIM member did it, and Peltier's covering, or doesn't know. Others point to Anime Aquash, an AIM activist murdered in 1975, allegedly for knowing too much about the killings. Her case is still unsolved. The FBI stands firm. Peltier's guilty, period. But the doubts linger, enough that 22 federal judges have reviewed his appeals, always upholding the conviction, yet never silencing the critics. It's a puzzle with missing pieces, and maybe it always will be. Today, Pine Ridge is still scarred. Poverty, crime, and echoes of 1975. Kohler and Williams are honored on the FBI's Wall of Honor, remembered as heroes who died in the line of duty. Peltier's a symbol, martyr to some, monster to others. His release doesn't end the fight, it just shifts it. Will history absolve him or cement his guilt? That's for time and maybe you to decide. Before we wrap up, let's take a moment. Jack Kohler was 28, a dad who loved his kids. Ronald Williams was 27, a guy who never got to grow old. Joe Stunts was 23, caught in the crossfire. And Leonard Peltier, he's 80 now, living out his days under house arrest. 4 lives collided that day, and the ripples are still spreading. That's the Ressmers case, folks. One of the wildest, most divisive stories I've ever covered. What do you think? Was justice served or denied? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm dying to hear them. If you like this deep dive, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. We've got more stories like this coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.